In this episode, number 24, I shall be discussing the reign of King Henry I, whose reign, despite being 35 years and I think the longest, apart from Ethelred's to date, is largely forgotten. Henry was the last of William the Conqueror's 4 sons, and the younger brother of the deceased King William II. Before he became king, Henry was the Count of Cotentin in Cherbourg, in Normandy, which gave him a power base which was largely independent of the Duke of Normandy, Robert, and out of reach for the whims of William Rufus. This allowed Henry a tutelage in government, which he wasn't really expected to get, being the 4th son and very unlikely to inherit the throne. His role in the death of William Rufus is disputed. We can't quite be sure whether Henry organised it himself, but as I mentioned in the previous podcast, Henry was certainly the chief beneficiary of this death, and it was very convenient. He was quite close to the New Forest at the time, and was able to seize the royal treasury in Winchester very quickly, allowing him to basically take over the machinery of government before Robert could even blink about it. And blink about it he eventually did. He contested Henry's claim, but Henry was able to overcome his invasion attempt, which he tried in 1101, by negotiation. Henry said he would give up his Norman lands in exchange for the English kingship, as well as an annual stipend to Robert of £2,000, which in those days is quite a bit of money. However, it took only a year before Henry decided to break the terms of this agreement, and he decided to break Robert's power base in England by devastating Surrey, Salisbury and Shrewsbury, and cutting off the appropriate heads of the earls and dukes of those places. He then decided to invade Normandy itself, and he re-established his own power base in Normandy through marrying his multiple illegitimate daughters to various Norman barons. And eventually, at the Battle of Tanchebray in 1106, he decisively defeated Robert, Duke of Normandy, and took Robert the prisoner. Robert still managed to be Duke of Normandy in name, but that was it. Henry was essentially the Duke in all but name. And indeed he was in name by 1134. A year before Henry's own death, Robert died in prison, so he became Duke of Normandy then as well. So that was that. In terms of relations with the church and that theme, he ended the quarrels with the church. He accepted the papal demands for the Pope to basically be in charge of the investiture of clergymen, which William had been not willing to do, although for Henry agreeing to the Pope's demands was just as much a quid pro quo, because Anselm, he wanted him back in the English government because he was actually quite an effective head of government. So Anselm obviously wanted the Gregorian reforms, so in order to get Anselm's support, he supported the Gregorian reforms. So that was probably quite politically canny of Henry, and of course he was also quite kind to the church, which is why the history books look a little bit more favourably on him than they do on William. In terms of his marriages and his kids, he married Matilda, who was the niece of Edgar Atheling, which meant that there was a link to the House of Wessex, which was still seen as very, very prestigious. They had a son together, only one, William Adelon, who was the apple of Henry's eye. Tragically for Henry and William, though, William died in 1120. He had gotten drunk with his crewmates on his ship, the White Ship, and crashed into a rock that they hadn't seen off of the coast of Normandy, which basically meant there was no legal heir to the throne, at least for a time. He did have a daughter called Matilda, who was also legitimate, and did actually declare the heir to the throne in 1127, got all the nobles of the realm to swear allegiance to her, but kind of set it up to fail, because even though he married her off to Geoffrey of Anjou, who was a powerful French duke, he didn't really give Geoffrey and Matilda castles in Normandy. They didn't really give them their own independent power base outside of Anjou. which kind of created a lot of problems for Matilda actually inheriting the throne in 1135, as we shall see. Ironically, Henry died just as Geoffrey and Matilda were rebelling against Henry for not giving them enough castles. So, whilst they were busy rebelling, Henry died, and then Stephen, who was Henry's nephew by one of William the Conqueror's daughters, Stephen, took the throne of England underneath Matilda's feet, which would set up the events of the anarchy from 1135 onwards. So that was largely the reign of Henry. If we're going to assess him, he was far more savvy administratively and calm vis-a-vis William Rufus, but some historians have argued he was just as cruel and despotic as William, but just far more subtle about it. He continued the centralised state and the theme of feudalism. He was very generous to his friends and his barons who were loyal to him, but he was absolutely brutal to his opponents, as demonstrated by when Robert rebelled, or Robert tried to invade those nobles who supported him, like Salisbury, Surrey, and Shrewsbury, were brutally incapacitated, whatever the word is, decimated. So there is that. He was called Beauclerc, which is the epithet you can see. That's actually Anglo-Norman for fine scholar, although it has again been debated among historians as to whether he was actually either a scholar or fine at it. I don't know, obviously, too much about that. So that was largely the reign of Henry in a nutshell. He was successful, but he kind of made the same mistake as Edward the Confessor and as some kings make, where they don't really do enough to ensure the succession they want. So that was, I suppose, his biggest letdown in this. Thank you very much, and I'll see you for King Stephen's next time.